this hearing on proposed changes to Title 39 of Columbus City Code, which governs the work of our Office of Diversity and Inclusion. These proposed changes are being brought to us by our Office of Diversity and Inclusion in the administration with advice from our City Attorney's Office. We will start off by hearing a joint presentation from our City Attorney's Office as well as the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, followed by council members' questions and public testimonies. It is always a tradition of mine as well, so for those that are viewing or those that are here, we want to make sure that we're transparent and make sure that voices are heard. So if you would like to speak, please let one of our staff know, but we will also be monitoring our social media channels, so please chime in and we will make sure we try to get those questions answered to the best of our ability. Before we go into presentations, I would like to briefly speak on Council's current approach to this proposal. The purpose of today's hearing is for us to hear and understand arguments as to why the Office of Diversity and Inclusion it feel that these code changes are necessary. As a bit of a background, the legislation that contains these changes was referred back to committee on July 28th, which means that there is, at this time, no set date for it to return to the agenda. I understand that when we talk about this subject, that it is something that is both meaningful to me as well as us as a city and our values. And so we want to make sure that we get this right. And so I want to first say I appreciate the administration for doing their due diligence and coming up with these changes, but we will also do our process to make sure that we are engaging with them, that we, when we bring something up for this body to consider, that it is something that we have really engaged around. So as of today, Council has not committed to moving these proposed changes forward, but yet we are here to listen to those changes, understanding the political climate that we find ourselves in. And we will do everything that we can to make sure that we comply with law, but we never compromise our values of who we are as a city. Before I move to the presentations, do any of my colleagues have any comments? And first, let me say I want to thank my colleagues for being here and leaning in on these proposed changes. Any comments from any of my colleagues? President Harden.
Thank you, Chair Banks, and appreciate your leadership in pulling us together, to Laura Baker Morris, to Jason Jenkins, and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and the Mayor's Office. We appreciate their engagement. As the Chair said, that we're here today to hear from the administration and from the City Attorney's Office on their recommendations for changes to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. But before we get into it, I want to make a few things clear based on some of the reporting that we've seen over the last couple of days. As the Chair said, nothing has been decided. Council has not come to any decision on our adoption of these recommendations. We are here to listen to the City Attorney's Office. We are here to listen to the administration, but we are also here to listen to the public. This is a public hearing, and we intend to make sure, as the Chair said, that we have a robust dialogue. Secondly, honestly, I'm pretty skeptical and uncertain as to how the city ought to proceed, and that's why we are looking to hear the discussion today, but again, to hear from the community as we consider. I am a former chair of the Small and Minority Business Committee, and we took a lot of time to build out the work that the Office of Diversity and Inclusion has done. I'm a person of strong faith, and there is a scripture that says, do not dig up in doubt what you planted in faith. And I think we have to be very thoughtful about these next steps. We have to be very clear-eyed of the political environment that we live in. We have to be understanding that this moment has, and how we operate in it, has potential consequences, real consequences to how we are able to operate as a city. But we should not move with haste. We should be thoughtful as we move through this. And so the good news is that we are here to listen today. And I think that that is something that council is really good at. And so we encourage folks to engage with us. And I've been, even just as the chair just said, even online. We are going to be aggressive listeners as we move through and think through these policies. So again, Chair, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for guiding this discussion. Thank you to the City Attorney's Office and to the administration for your thoughtfulness in a very, very difficult and challenging time. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the Chair.
Thank you, Council President. Any of my other colleagues? All right, great. We will jump right into it and get to the presentations. And this will be a joint presentation, and so we will probably pause and try to do questions in between. First up, we will hear from our Deputy City Attorney, Laura Baker Morris, who I think will help set kind of the ground, if you will, as to how we got here and what the legal ramifications are in that. And then followed by that, we'll have our Director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion really walk us through what the proposed changes are. With that, Madam Deputy City Attorney, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Bankston, Council President Harden. Thank you for having me here today to lay out some of the legal groundwork for why we're here this evening, considering potential code changes to Title 39 of the Columbus City Codes. So as this body is aware, the city currently has an Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and within that office, there is a program whereby this department certifies minority and women-owned businesses as MBEs and WBEs. In addition to the certification process for those business entities, the department had engaged in a program that would allow for bid discounts and incentive credits to be provided on a per project, per procurement basis in order to remedy past acts of discrimination and or disparate impact from past neutral acts of the city in this environment. The ability to do and engage in that kind of programming is predicated upon a series of federal laws and federal case decisions that have evolved over the last number of decades. Specifically, the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, as applied to the states and to local government as a result, prohibits discrimination on the basis of race or gender. However, there are certain circumstances in the evolving federal law and the evolving federal case law emanating out of the 14th Amendment that would allow for local governments where there is determined to be a disparate impact based upon either race-neutral and or race-conscious practices and policies in the past in order to remedy and mitigate prior instances of harm that have occurred to individuals who are so classified. The city engaged in a disparity study back in 2017 based upon data that was collected between 2012 and 2015. And in 2019, an executive study summary was issued, and both this council and the administration adopted that study and implemented those programs based upon the analysis that was provided in that disparity study. Over this period of time, since the time that the program went into effect, as I indicated before, this is all predicated upon federal law and federal case precedent. Those laws and precedents are ever evolving and ever changing. And it's the role of the city attorney's office to provide guidance to both this council and to the administration about the ability to continue to maintain compliance with those laws. Without getting into our specific legal advice, the reason that we are here today is to hear from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion about recommended code changes that they are proposing to the City Council in order to assure that whatever programs the city has are in compliance with existing federal law. To be clear, the federal administration has issued a series of executive orders earlier this year, and the potential negative impact of running afoul of some of the provisions of those executive orders can include not only the loss of considerable federal funding, but also the potential for prison terms and penalties for individuals working within the city who run afoul of those laws. That said, some of the issues that we're dealing with related to Title 39 and to the current disparity study and the disparity program also are issues and concerns that would have existed during the period of time prior to the issuance of those executive orders. We always have to make sure that our programming evolves as the law evolves, And as a result, we are here tonight to look about different ways of offering to those business enterprises within our jurisdiction the ability to engage in city procurement and to be able to meaningfully interact with city procurement processes. So I'm here tonight to answer any other questions that the council might have or to weigh in on anything revolving the specific framework for the proposed legislative changes as those questions arise throughout the evening.
Thank you, Deputy City Attorney. And I know that you said this, but if you just could go into that differentiation between law and what is before us. I know there are some decisions out of the Sixth Circuit Court, and I think it's a political climate in higher courts that bring us to this moment. But the difference between, I think, law and what these executive orders are.
Absolutely. So executive orders are the executive branch's orders to its administrative bodies. They are policy assertions. They can be directions to their administrative agencies about how to behave in order to implement those policies. They are not in and of themselves law. There can be contractual obligations that a party might incur that might include some of those conditions and terms that are dictated by the executive order to its agencies. And certainly the enforcement of those contractual terms would be heard and it would have the force of law, but they are not themselves law. When I'm speaking up here about federal law, I'm talking about acts of Congress, or I'm talking about administrative agencies who engage in rulemaking through the rulemaking process as established by the Administrative Procedure Act. We have had neither one of those at this point in time relating to the executive order terms and conditions that we're referring to here tonight. So federal law comes from the Congress. Administrative agencies engage in rulemaking, which is authorized by virtue of authority granted to them from the Congress and congressional acts. And then, of course, the courts come in and they interpret those laws. So you have the Supreme Court of the United States, and then below that, the circuit courts for the federal courts, and below that, the district courts. And those different courts will then take it upon themselves through cases and controversies that come before them to interpret not only the federal laws and the rules and regulations, but also the terms of the U.S. Constitution and its amendments. And so when we're speaking about the body of case law, I'm talking about the courts interpreting federal law and the courts interpreting the federal Constitution. And those, of course, apply to the City of Columbus. And so when we have decisions coming out of the Southern District of Ohio, which is where the City of Columbus sits, or out of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which again is where the City of Columbus sits, or we have decisions coming out of the Supreme Court of the United States, which applies to the entire nation, we have to adhere to those opinions, and we have to follow those interpretations by those different courts. And as we're talking about the uses of disparity studies, as we're talking about affirmative action provisions generally, there have been a number of cases over the last number of years that give guidance and direction to local governments that we must follow if they have been enacted or if they have been, ordered by courts in the jurisdiction in which we sit. And so as legal counselor to the city, the guidance that the city attorney's office would provide would be what are the prevailing legal case precedents, what is the federal law as it exists right at this moment in time, and then we would provide guidance on how we believe that our current programs or practices do or do not fall within those legal requirements.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from my colleagues, specifically for the city attorney or around this? I know that we'll have plenty of time, of course, to ask her questions again, but just wanted to make sure. Yeah, Councilmember White.
Thank you, Chair. And Deputy City Attorney, just to clarify again, regardless of the executive orders, we were likely looking at some changes that need to happen in ODI just because of, how we were looking at that previous data. Is that correct?
As I said, the federal law is ever evolving, and it would make sense that a program that was initiated back in 2019 would need to continue to evolve as federal law evolves. So it's an ongoing process. We provide daily guidance on keeping in and staying in compliance with federal law. And as I stated at the beginning of my remarks, the data in this particular case was collected during 2012 to 2015. It is part of using a disparity study to continuously make sure that you're refreshing that data as demographics change, as populations grow. And so that's a normal part of the process of determining whether or not that analysis that was relevant and appropriate at that time stays relevant and appropriate, or if it needs to be updated, or it needs to be reviewed, or to be looked at.
Chair. Can you talk to us a little bit about the implications when you talk about the difference between the executive order and when you talk about law, right? And what is at stake in each one of those buckets? Because I think that's just important for folks to understand the entire landscape when we talk about the difference between the two.
Sure. Executive orders, if we were a federal agency, they would directly apply to us. But executive orders issued by the Office of the President are, as I said, are orders to their administrative agencies. And the only way that they then become applicable to local government, in this particular case, is if they are included as a term or condition of a grant, if they get enacted into law by the Congress, if the executive agency engages in rulemaking and enacts a rule or regulation that would apply to us. And so the biggest way that executive orders may come to impact the city is if we continue to seek federal funding to support a number of our programs and policies, and those federal grant program agreements are then incorporating some of the terms and conditions of the executive orders. So it's not the order itself that would impact us, it would be the need to follow the terms and conditions that are created by the order, because it would become a contractual obligation of the city by virtue of accepting the grant money.
And that would affect federal dollars writ large across the city.
Depending on how they were incorporated into the grant money. Some instances, the agencies are incorporating it and making it applicable specifically to the spend down of those funds themselves. In other words, if you want to take advantage of this grant, you must follow these terms. And if you don't follow these terms, you can't use that money on this kind of programming. Other instances, and we've been involved in litigation challenging these things across the nation. Other instances, what you're seeing is if your agency, if your city engages in this behavior, then you can't have access to federal grant funding at large. So again, it depends on the specific agency and how they've attempted to incorporate it into their grant agreement terms. And in some instances, it's been broad, and in other instances, it's been limited to the specific funds being used in a particular way.
So that is in the bucket of executive orders.
Correct.
Then in the other side, in terms of law, if we
Yes.
are outside of the law from the Sixth Circuit Court, or what are the ramifications of that?
So if there is a federal law that is specifically directed to the acts of local government or to the acts or officials of local government, and there's very few that are directly at local government, but there can be. And if you were to violate those terms and conditions, then you could be held accountable for a violation of federal law. And that violation could be criminal in nature, it could be civil in nature. For instance, if a city agrees to accept funds from a particular funding source, federal funding source, and then we don't spend those funds in the way that the Congress has determined that we're supposed to spend those funds, then we could be held as a city accountable to civil penalties and provisions for violating federal law and the way that we expended those federal monies. So that's separate and different. It's established by the Congress and/or by rules and regulations from the administrative agencies, and they may contain civil penalties, criminal penalties, fines, things along those lines. And again, they have been properly enacted by a legislative body, and/or they have been the subject of rulemaking at the administrative level.
And thus far, have we seen a precedence where local governments have been penalized in this way?
Yes, yeah, yeah. There have been circumstances where local governments have been found to run afoul of any federal prohibitions on the use of funds, and sometimes that can result in penalties, sometimes that can result in simply remitting the funds that were improperly used, things along those lines. Yes, that can happen. And that's slightly different from federal case precedent. As it applies to local government, is usually federal courts construing provisions of the U.S. Constitution. And that's where you'll get, when we have, issues where there's an allegation that the city violated somebody's 14th Amendment rights or their First Amendment rights. The federal courts then weigh in on what constitutes a First Amendment protected right or a 14th Amendment protected right, and what authority government has to engage in restrictions that would not run afoul of those constitutional provisions. So that's the court's role as to local government.
All right, following up on that line of questioning, the Supreme Court's decision in the Harvard and North Carolina college admission cases,
Yes.
where the use of race and gender were determined to be illegal conduct.
Yeah.
Has that logic or that decision been utilized in any subsequent cases against cities, municipalities, states, or anything like that? Are you aware of any?
I cannot say that I have a full encyclopedic knowledge. I can say that is the concern. Generally speaking, when you have a Supreme Court decision in a particular area construing a particular provision of the U.S. Constitution, it is then, of course, used as case precedent in arguing that in analogous situations. And so when we see the Supreme Court of the United States looking at race-based discriminatory allegations as relates to universities, even though universities are a slightly different
Surely.
circumstance than local government, it sends up a signal that there might be concerns that same logic might apply to situations involving disparity studies, for one. I can't say that I'm specifically aware of one that is within our jurisdiction happening at this moment in time, but certainly anybody that's thinking about how to advise and what the case precedent might be would be concerned about and would look to whether or not that might have precedential value.
Yes, and to the second point that the councilwoman was making regarding the contractual, would that apply to grants which flow through the state of Ohio and then are distributed to a city? So
They
it may
can.
have started off a grant, some block grant or something
Yes.
like that goes to the state of Ohio and then is distributed to different cities.
Yes.
Same logic?
Yes, so a large amount, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but a large amount of the funds that the city of Columbus receives as federal funding is actually passing through the state of Ohio. We also, because we are a larger city, receive some funds directly, but there's a good amount of them that also pass through the state and through state administrative agencies. And what we see is that those grant agreements that flow from the federal government through the state down to the city, the agreements that come from the federal government flow through those agreements down to us.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Beatty. So Councilmember Beatty is also a lawyer. So when two lawyers start talking, I get really, really scared and nervous because they use a lot of terms I don't know. Before we move on, Deputy City Attorney, I just want to ask, there are many lawsuits that are currently pending against the Trump administration. In particular, if you could just talk to the one regarding ODI, where it stands right now, is the city of Columbus involved in that lawsuit, and just where it currently is right now? I know that there's not been a decision made and you can't opine on what the results would be, but if you could just talk about where the litigation currently stands, particular to that executive order.
As to DEI?
Yes,
Oh,
sorry,
it's
DEI, sorry.
Okay. So the city of Columbus is engaged in, I've almost lost track. We need Solicitor General here tonight, at least in 5 different pieces of litigation related to the executive orders. two of which are relevant to DEI, and each one of them involves different administrative agencies at the federal government level. So there's one coming out of King County, there's one out of Harris County, there's one out of San Francisco that are most relevant. The one coming out of San Francisco was recently, a preliminary injunction was issued, and that one relates to HUD funding, I want to say. My point in all of this is that a number of them involve the DEI executive orders, a number of them involve the immigration executive orders, a number of them involve the gender equality executive orders, and not all of them involve them in the same way. But what we have so far found is success in these initial pieces of litigation as we have been challenging the way in which the federal administration has been attempting to impose them upon the city. And what I want to just state out here now is that we have been successful because they are attempting to, as an example, withhold funds that we had already been contractually informed that we had been awarded. They have been attempting to insert terms and conditions into agreements that we had already executed. They had attempted to insert terms and conditions into grant agreements where the grant agreements themselves were entitlement grants passed by Congress. So there have been a variety of different procedural errors that have resulted in us being successful in, as parts of these pieces of litigation, and seeking preliminary injunctions to allow those federal funds to continue to flow. The concern is, however, over time, if Congress should choose to act, if the administrative agencies should choose to engage in rulemaking, we would be looking at a different set of issues and concerns as we would attempt to continue to seek to be able to access federal funding under those conditions.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure there will be more questions for our city attorney. At this point, I want to turn over to our Office of Diversity and Inclusion to really walk us through what is this legislation, what are the proposed changes, given the advice that was given, how we really got here.
Yep.
But more importantly, I think, what is the pathway forward in which you all are proposing to this body? So Director Jenkins, I'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Chair Bankston, Council President Harden, council members. First, I want to thank this team behind me. This is a wonderful team that helped put a lot of this work together. I also want to thank the viewers and the individuals that have come to listen and hear what is actually happening and how we're moving forward as a city. These proposed changes are, again, we're ever evolving as a department, as a office. These are changes that we're looking to look into your guidance on as well, to take a vote on, to look at. So when we get into this work, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this work is forever changing, it's constant. And it's something that we've been looking at for a while, and we know that there are some things that we need to do, and we can get into future state after the presentation of what else is coming down the pipeline as well. So Laura has already gone over the why we need to make some of these changes, looking at legal trends, modernizing our program, expanding our economic footprint within the city of Columbus to a more regional-based program, seeing that we are growing as a city, and that is something that's stated as a fact. And then also strengthening our commitment to the impact of economic growth and our supplier engagement. The two proposed designations that we're looking to add on are a small regional business enterprise as well as our regional business enterprise. And this will be addition to our other certifications, which we'll go over here shortly in the presentation. For our small regional businesses, we want to look at those businesses that by size. So we're looking at the revenue stream as well as the employees, the number of employees that are within those businesses. And then for our regional businesses, we'll be looking at businesses within Ohio. I do want to make a point here. We track all statistical data for these businesses: race, gender, revenue, employee size. These are things that we have been tracking for years and we will continue to track because it just informs the city better on how we need to move and how we need to engage our businesses. We also want to, I also want to point out these two programs are race neutral. And so what we're looking at is race and gender neutral programs because this is something that was added legally within the Sixth Circuit that we have to start tracking and identifying as well. Other programs that we have that are race and gender neutral are our veteran-owned program. Benefits of these two programs, we're looking at looking at the bid discounts as well as the incentive credits. So that's one thing that we want to make sure that we add to these two programs. Increasing access to city contracts for all of our small businesses, as well as participating within the development of these businesses. We work closely with the Office of Development as we start to move these things forward. We see businesses that are ready to take on city contracts, and we have businesses that are not. And so we have a symbiotic relationship where we work back and forth, and we want to make sure we capture that within these two designations. And so here are the other identifications that we currently identify and currently and still will be certifying these businesses. I want to be clear there. We still will be certifying each one of these businesses. So we have our minority business enterprise, we have our women's business enterprise, we also have emerging businesses enterprise. These are for projects that the city may have resources on, but may not actually be a city project. For example, North Market. We do track those businesses that are working with the North Market project, but it's not so much, we have a loose hand in tracking that because there are city resources tied to that versus a police substation, which we actually have more control, more visibility over. We also we will still be certifying our veteran-owned businesses as well as our LGBTQ owned businesses. Some other things that we're going to be implementing or we would like to propose to implement are some different programs. We have a anti-discrimination policy that we would like to set forth and put in
Director
place.
Jenkins, I'm sorry, can you move a little bit closer to the mic? I'm having a hard time hearing.
Sorry
I'm
about
not sure
that.
if my colleagues are, but that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are looking to implement some discrimination policies within our work, looking at our primes that come in and making sure that those bids that they are accepting, those subcontractors that they're accepting on these projects, they're doing a fair bid to accept those subs. We also be implementing a prime mentorship program. This is where we are trying to grow businesses from that small business state to the mid-size to our large-size businesses, and we'll be working with external partners to develop that program. We are also internally building a shelter market program. So with our shelter market program, we'll be looking at businesses that are within that small regional business category, and we will be working with them so they get first access to smaller contracts, and they're not competing against larger companies, larger primes. They'll be competing against individuals within their same space, their same size, so to speak. And then we also are developing a dispute resolution process. This is for any of our certified businesses. If you are on a city contract, if you're subcontracting with a prime, and you feel like you've been done wrong, we want to make sure that we address that. And in any way, shape, or form, we are developing that process now, and we'll be rolling that out as well. And so with that, that is the end of my presentation. And we're open to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I'll open up to my colleagues if there are any questions. Councilmember White.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director, for walking through the changes that you're considering. Can you talk a little bit about the dispute resolution process? I know you all are kind of figuring out what that looks like, but examples of what type of disputes that you're seeing out there. As Public Utilities Chair, I hear from subcontractors all the time about this issue, but just want to make sure we spell it out for folks.
So I do want to give thanks to Dewana Allen, a member of my team who will be leading the charge on that dispute resolution process. And simplistically, we also hear from our subcontractors on many projects that they feel something has gone awry within the contract. The work that they were assigned to perform may have been taken away from them, or there were dollars, or there may have been some workforce issues. And so in the midst of this time, we've heard that multiple times, and we want to make sure that there's a clear process for all of our subcontractors to get access to support. We want to make sure that if there is a dispute between the prime and the subcontractor, there's an opportunity for dialogue to happen first before the city really has to step in and maybe mitigate the situation, or if it goes legal in any way, shape, or form. So we want to make sure that we're supporting all of our small businesses in that space.
And will there be something, I mean, I know, again, this is still a process that is evolving, but are we looking at how we avoid retaliatory actions, right? I think we are hearing from subcontractors who are hesitant to bring concerns forward because they don't want to be, stiff-armed from future opportunities with those same primes who are really capturing a lot of the work.
That's an excellent question. So I'm going to go back to the discrimination policy that we're writing. That will be the cover for that. So if you are on a project, you do have a dispute with the prime, and then you move to another project and you feel like you've, again, been discriminated against because you did speak up, discrimination policy, we will be working to catch that retaliatory action.
Councilmember Barossa de Padilla.
Thank you, Chair. Director Jenkins, can you just put a finer point for folks who might not have been familiar with Title 39 or familiar with specifically what your office did when we talk about the changes without, besides the addition of small business and regional business, if we're still certifying folks in the specific different categories, right? Women, minority, LGBTQ plus, veterans, what is the difference, I guess, for folks, right? If they're seeing headlines that's saying that we're shying away from things, but it still looks like we're doing the thing, can you just put a finer point on what the changes are or what we need to back away from in order to potentially be compliant? What are the potential changes to be compliant? Because I'm not sure that that's clear for folks if they're not familiar.
Absolutely. So currently what we're looking to do, we're setting bid points and goals based on race and gender. To be in compliance, to potentially be in compliance, we would have to stop setting those goals based on race and gender. So what we're looking at is setting goals based on the size of the business, and that could be revenue, and that also can be employee size. And so that goal setting now will be shift to that small regional business, and that small regional business strictly looks at size of business versus race and gender.
And can you break down what those numbers are? So what are we defining a small business and what are we defining a regional business?
I would love to break that down for you, but we're still assessing that.
Great, thank you.
So we're still looking at, we have SBA standards, federal standards, which are across the entire country, and those are very large and do not fit our market. So we're looking at we're playing around with different numbers, different sizes. We are moving forward with an availability study, which will give us a better understanding of the size and the depth of the type of businesses we have in the city. So that work is still to be determined and finalized. Right now, with the estimates that we have, all of the 93% of our certified businesses currently have the potential to be transferred over to the small regional business program with the numbers that we're looking at currently.
And then you mentioned within the specific categories, right, of identities that we have defined that you can get a certification under, you said that there was an alignment essentially with other opportunities that folks may have. If you're a women-owned business, if you're a minority-owned business, et cetera, that there are other programs within the city that are specific for those categories, if I heard you correctly?
So
and those would continue?
Yes, we will still be certifying those businesses. We will not be singling out any one particular business based on race and gender, but there are programs throughout the city, throughout the country, different organizations that we partner with that provide resources specifically for those businesses, and we will continue to push that forward.
So the biggest change for folks, again, just because I know that I think there are people who live in this world and understand all of this. And for some folks who may have just seen a headline and may be wondering what we're doing differently, if folks are tuning in, we are still providing the same services. We are still providing certification for those folks. What is changing is the stipulations that folks may have about engaging with those specific businesses and incentives that they may get around on specific contracts, correct?
Correct.
So
It is-
the intentionality that I'm sorry, just to be clear, the intentionality in which we are moving people towards to ensure that we're offering opportunities, that is what, there's a modification in that.
Correct. So we will be adjusting, we would like to propose in setting goals on projects, not being based on race and gender, but being based on the size of the business, as well as the bid points that they will be receiving will be based on the size of the business, not on race and gender.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was like, go ahead, Council President, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to get some clarity, though. It is my understanding that based off of advisement from the city attorney's office, we are already in compliance, correct? We've already paused the piece of the issue that we're here to discuss. And so what we're really talking about is the expansion of categories versus a contraction of categories. Is that correct? We have already paused the piece that we thought we may have been out of compliance with.
That is 100% correct. Yes.
So the recommendations that the city attorney is bringing towards us and the administration is bringing towards us is to expand a new category, which is small business, and then regional business, which the administration is arguing would actually allow us to still serve, did I hear 93% of the
Certified business.
certified businesses that
Yes, sir.
we already serve. So where that leads me then is there ways to strengthen and clarify the work that we're doing now that we believe remains within compliance? Is this the best way to do that?
I think this is the quickest way to get there. Our path forward and currently what we're looking at is starting the availability study as soon as possible. Again, that lets us know the demographic of small businesses that are in our market, in our MSA area. That expands us, that brings more businesses into the city of Columbus. The next step then would be to look at doing another disparity study in '26 at some point. I'm thinking proposing that somewhere mid to late '26, and then going back to looking at what we need to do, because by then we would have data, which is required by the Sixth Circuit, and I'm looking at Laura to back me up here, they're asking that we have data showing that we have a race and gender neutral program up and running and what has come out of that. So with those three pieces, the availability study, the race and gender neutral program, as well as the disparity study coming together, we can expand the program. We can do more with it. We can push harder, push farther to make sure that we're getting the work done that needs to be done for our small businesses. But again, that takes time. That takes time. And we need to, and some of these studies take up to a year, right? And it's a lot of data that we need to shift through. I think this particular path forward is the quickest path forward to make sure that we can continue to do the work that we need to do with the businesses that need to be served.
And again, the only reason I'm asking us, what I am hoping that we can do between council, the city attorney's office, and the administration is to be as specific as we can and as fine-tooth as we can to stay compliant and obviously follow the law, but not to be over-compliant or to.
Correct.
And so, again, if we've already paused the things that we feel are outside of compliance, we're not even doing those anymore, then really it seems to me is under consideration is just an expansion of new categories that will allow us to capture it would allow us to have new categories and survey my understanding a broader group of small businesses, not just in the county, but in the region.
Correct.
Okay.
And also, I want to make one additional point. There is a software that we're bringing online, again, with the help of Aaron Powell and NKI Consulting. We are looking at bringing on this software called B2G to make sure that we keep track of spend as well. So not only are we looking demographically, we also are looking at the dollars that are being spent more accurately. And again, modernizing our system to make sure that we are tracking and making sure that our small businesses are being served and receiving the funds dedicated to them to do this work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Beatty?
Thank you, Director, and thank you for the department for all the work that you're doing. I'm following up on the councilwoman's question about certification, for instance. So I just want to be clear on this. So we obviously have these new categories. And so the women-owned businesses and the minority businesses, there will be no women and minority certification?
Absolutely. No. They're absolutely not. We still will be certifying women-owned, minority-owned, LGBTQ-owned, veteran-owned, small businesses, emerging businesses.
Okay, now.
All those certifications still stay in place.
Let me follow up on that a little bit. And I'm sure you've heard this from many minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, that the certification process sometimes is a burden. The amount of information that you have to provide that other businesses don't have to provide, whether it be financial, birth certificates, all kinds of indicia to prove that you're minority, woman, LGBTQ, etc. If those particular categories are going to only be counted for statistical purposes, what would be the practical purpose of having the additional burdensome process?
I can only speak from a personal standpoint.
Sure.
I'm Black and I'm proud. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that. And so I would come in and I would want to be certified as a minority-owned business. One, to make sure that, because the contracts don't just stop with the city of Columbus. There are other entities out there that are doing amazing work. The airport, for example, they still are tracking their spend, and they take our certification. The county is still tracking their spend, and they take our certification. So it's not just us that use this certification. It's multiple individuals, and it's not just in the city of Columbus. It's across the state, and it's across the country, quite honestly. So the certification holds weight. But me personally, I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do.
And what is the current status of, or maybe how you were maybe thinking about this on cross-certification? So if someone goes to NSDC, I always mess those acronyms up.
MSDC, yeah.
Right,
MSDC.
that, or State of Ohio, which program is still in
Correct.
existence at this point. Are we at the status that the city will accept those certifications, thus reducing the burden for these businesses to have multiple certifications that they have to go through?
Yes, we've had a reciprocal agreement with many of these organizations, OMSDC, the state of Ohio, as well as WEBEC. So we still have a reciprocal agreement. And honestly, Councilmember Beatty, I have a phenomenal team that can work you through in a couple of days. So any burdens that you do have, any issues that you may have, we would love to challenge to work with you.
Can I ask a question?
Council President?
Director, what level of community engagement has happened? These are, especially over the last few days, I think that the reports that have been in the media rightfully scared folks. Folks who have worked really hard to get a foothold and do work within this city, understanding the historical discrimination that has kept a lot of us out of business, out of the opportunity to engage with this city. What is the administration doing to engage with the community to make sure that they are brought along through this process, to make sure that that through these changes, that they know how to still engage with the city if council were to adopt some of these changes?
So we've had several community conversations around proposed changes. This was not done in a vacuum. And I think that is clear with the individuals that are sitting behind me, not just my team, but the ones that are sitting out in the pews. We've had many conversations around this work. We have identified other partners across the state that have made changes, that are looking to make changes. Truthfully, they're looking to the city of Columbus to see what we're doing. So I think if individuals that were reading these particular headlines, if they read deeper into the different articles that were taking place, they would realize that these changes have been that we're proposing. We're ready to make sure that we do not lose sight of the work that's being done, that needs to be done in this. And so the outreach has happened. We've done several town halls. We've had individual meetings, Zoom calls, WebExes with a host of partners in the community.
Are we following the lead or engaging with other community municipalities? And that might be a city attorney question. How or where do we stack up among other municipalities who have to think around compliance in this moment?
So
Or is
it's
this a specific Columbus issue?
I'm sorry, Council President. It is specific to Columbus in the sense that every city who has a disparity study and who has a program that's based upon that disparity study has done it slightly differently and at slightly different times. And so what I can say is that we're all listening to, if we're within the same circuit, the same set of laws that we have to adhere to, but it's going to depend a great deal upon at what point in time did you last conduct your disparity study? What kind of disparate impact was found? What remedial action did the city take? Did it remedy any of that disparity? So all of those things are very specific to the specific entity that's engaging in the program.
Chair, I just wanted to also, I'm sorry, Council President, I just also wanted to commend your team as a follow-up to what Councilmember Beatty said. I think that we have seen that because there are benefits to some of the programs that are here, that folks do not squarely fall into the definition of a women-owned business or minority-owned business, and have also tried to take advantage of the system. And so I think part of the process being arduous is just to ensure that there isn't folks who are then taking advantage of the system from people who have been disadvantaged and have not been able to access it. And additionally, I think, our team has also made it more accessible, with the changes to Title 39. If you are a green card holder and you can lawfully have a business in the United States of America, before you could not have gotten certified because that citizenship question was a barrier for folks. So we actually made it more accessible, arguably, for folks to attain certification, which then opened the field to people who had, getting the benefits of certification and then opening up their networks to be able to be a sub on some of these large projects. So I just also wanted to point that out, because I think as we're talking about what the potential negatives could be, I think we also need to talk about the positives of what you have done in terms of accessibility for the larger portion of the community, from people who have not been able to, access some of these contracts. They have not been on the radar of many of the large primes, and so your team has made that possible for them. And so I think, it kind of cuts both ways. And I think for the times when we have heard of folks who have had challenges, your team has been responsive to helping them through that process so that they can achieve that certification. So I wanted to make sure that we also commended your team on that, because I know you've been taking a lot of hits lately, all of you, and you are I think your team is dedicated to ensuring that folks can go through this process and can access all of the resources as residents of Columbus. So I just wanted to say thank you and point that out.
Thank you. Any more questions from my colleagues? Before we open it up to the public, and that's where we're going to go, I just want to share, I think, some thoughts that, I came into this hearing with. First, I want to say that I think we all understand that this is a complex issue. one that is, quite honestly, close to many of our hearts and personal morals, including my own. However, what we're dealing with today is not just a personal issue, but it's a legal one. Our city attorney, our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, even this body, regardless of personal opinion, has responsibility to ensure that Columbus legally complies with federal law. And as the council president said, not overly do that, but ensure that we don't compromise our values. And in that same way, council also has an obligation to consider legislation that aims to protect against physical, financial, or legal threats to the city's well-being. Our consideration of this proposal does not equate, and let me repeat that again, does not equate to the rollback of DEI initiatives or us giving into the demands of the current president and his administration. In actuality, some of these changes, as you've heard today, expand the work of the office and gives it more flexibility to serve our small business community, which will still include historically disadvantaged groups. As the director just said, 93% of those folks. These proposed changes could be a chance to really future-proof our Office of Diversity and Inclusion so that we can continue serving residents equitably while protecting the integrity of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and its team. Let's take a moment to consider the reality here that municipalities throughout this country, including ours, are being attacked by federal court systems that have shifted to targeting and criminalizing DEI work. And I want to be very clear, this will be a messy process, but I am going to lean in. There are other folks in our region, other municipalities, other institutions that have seemingly wiped away their DEI programs without this type of conversation. To be very, very clear about that. But we're not going to strive away from that. We're going to do the hard work to work with community to have a true conversation around this. And as we navigate those rollbacks, we have a difficult balance to strike. But this challenge we plan to tackle head on with intention. And that said, contrary to narratives that have been spun the last few days, the outcomes of this proposal have not been decided. This is simply a proposal. As long as I sit in this seat, I remain committed to championing diversity, equity, and inclusion, regardless of what form it takes. This is our moment to be intentional, not just simply as a city, but as a society. That if we believe in these things, shouldn't take a mandate, shouldn't take a position or a name on an office door. It's on us as a society to say that we believe in equity, which I believe Columbus does. If we believe in inclusion, which I believe the people of Columbus do, then we should expect it in all facets of our lives, whether it be policy, whether it be how we do business, whether it be how we treat each other as a people and as a community. This is our moment to be intentional. And now I know that not the only one in this room tonight who feels that way. And I want to thank everyone for being here. And so with that, I will move on to public comment. But I want to be very, very clear to folks that are in this room, as well as to our media partners. Please get this right. This is a proposal. Nothing is decided. We will do what is necessary to make sure that we are compliant with law, not the opinion of someone who sits in, and currently occupies the seat of the presidency, but the law. But we will do that in a way that does not compromise the values of this community and the people of Columbus. And as long as I sit here, and I don't speak for my colleagues, but I think the way that they have engaged here shows that we want to get this right. And that we're not going to move with haste or be bullied, but we are going to stand strong and stand with the people of Columbus. And with that, we will hear from the people of Columbus. So as of today, at our 12 p.m. deadline, we had two written testimonies that have been entered into the record from Ms. LaShandra Baker and Shalane Hutchinson. We also did receive one piece of written testimony well after the 12 p.m. deadline from Rachel Winning, but I will, however, allow that to be added into the record even though it was after the deadline because we are committed to transparency and making sure that we hear folks' voices. We also received two requests for in-person testimony from Ms. J. Avery Frost as well as Ms. Gail Saunders, and we will have them come at this time. I would like to note, too, that the three written testimony submissions were shared with all of our council offices and also with the clerk's office prior to this hearing and will be part of the record. At this time, I want to invite Ms. J. Avery Frost to come. You have been here before, so you know the deal. 3 minutes and your name and organization that you represent.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, Chair Bankston, Council President Harden, members. Appreciate your time this afternoon. I do want to specifically thank ODI. I do know that you are the messenger, so I just want to say that for the record. Yeah, so I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding the proposed changes to Title 39, and I was hoping to hear of specific legislative action that has happened against the city to precipitate this, right? So not an executive order or anything like that, but like a specific case, a specific case that we could look at and review as we talk about these kind of conversations. I didn't hear that specifically, but I am curious as to what those are. And while the goal of modernizing language and supporting regional small businesses is commendable, and we think that adding additional race-neutral frameworks risks reversing years of hard-fought progress in Columbus's contracting equity. So let me start off, are we clear? So I got the email yesterday. I had a chance to review the proposed changes overnight. So if there's anything kind of off, it's because it was short notice. Okay, so you guys are proposing to add more businesses, not only from in city limits, but beyond city limits and across the state of Ohio. And we're supposed to still be able to participate, but theoretically, we already are having challenges participating. So I'm not sure how that still meets the goal. But we do know that supplier diversity programs were created to counteract systemic exclusion. And we know that race-neutral approaches remove that intentionality, leaving minority and women-owned businesses vulnerable to being overlooked once again. Without intentional inclusion, contracts will naturally flow back to firms already entrenched in procurement, narrowing, not expanding our competitive edge. Supplier diversity helps circulate public dollars in under-resourced communities, building jobs and wealth. A race-neutral system risks concentrating opportunity in fewer hands, undermining neighborhood stability and generational progress. The city's most recent disparity study clearly demonstrated persistent underutilization of minority and women-owned businesses in an environment where there were no specific goals or set-asides. For example, Black-owned businesses represented up to 22.5% of available contractors, but received as little as 3 to 7% of awards. Collectively, between 2012 and 2015, African-American firms missed over $84 million in potential contract opportunities. Meanwhile, 10.32% of all contracts went to out-of-state contractors, meaning that in that particular environment, almost 90% of contracts already went to the businesses you're trying to get in the program with the program update. These numbers proved that race-neutral contracting alone does not deliver equity. Further, this evidence provided a legal foundation for race-conscious programs under the Supreme Court's Croson decision. And with the data in hand, the city didn't fully act on disparity study recommendations that could have begun to remediate harms to the MBE-WBE community. And with the proposed updates, the city risks diluting supplier diversity's impact by not refreshing its equity data while simultaneously expanding neutral categories. I am happy to hear of an availability study being reviewed, but that definitely needs to happen ASAP. And I do recognize the pressure municipalities face from recent federal dictates, and some municipalities are pre-complying. However, courts have already blocked aspects of these orders. And so I just encourage you guys to, instead of doing these changes, I know that it's a proposal, but I would just triple down on going and doing the disparity study, and don't let the data age on the shelf, and use that to have a defensible program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frost, and thank you for all the work. You could probably hang out over here, because if I missed some of your questions, I want to make sure you come back and clarify. But I just want to just point out and thank you for the work that you have done in this space, and not you, but your entire family has done in this space. It is not missed, I think, on me and this body, how critical that work has been. There were a couple specific things that I want to make sure I get answered for you really quickly. To our Deputy City Attorney, I think that Ms. Avery mentioned specific case law that has brought us to this. Could you just clarify what that is in particular? Again, the law, not necessarily the executive order that I think has been talked so much about.
A specific case brought against the city or a specific case?
No, I think her question was around, there have been rulings out of the Supreme Court that I think gave us the ability to do the work that we've been doing, but I think it was talked about that there has since been out of the Sixth Circuit Court. But what is that specific case, and what were, I guess, the merits there that got us to this place of having to do race-neutral
So
remedies?
I can provide the case site at the close of the hearing, because unfortunately I've neglected to write it down. However, it's out of the Sixth Circuit, and the Sixth Circuit opined on what would be required in order to have a sufficient demonstration that a race-conscious or a gender-conscious program would be permissible under the 14th Amendment. And that decision by the Sixth Circuit would be applicable to the City of Columbus. The City of Columbus was not a plaintiff or a defendant in that particular case. However, because the City of Columbus is located within the Sixth Circuit, the reasoning in that case would equally apply to any program that the city had that was also race and gender conscious.
Got it. And
If I may add here,
go ahead.
Ms. Frost, she referenced the Croson case. Croson versus City of Richmond from United States Supreme Court, 1987, okay, which set forth the standard. And I believe that Columbus's first MBE program was based on the requirements of that particular case. Unfortunately, over subsequent years, and I don't have all the case sites, those standards have been eroded and expanded. So the standards of Croson, the things that you needed to prove to have a supplier diversity program, I'll call it that, they are at this time not valid, because there's been subsequent court cases that have eroded that. Similarly, like in college admissions, the Bakke case from 1974, Bakke versus Berkeley, have been eroded over the years to get us to the point that we are at now. So there may be a Supreme Court case, but it's eroded. Now, my particular knowledge of the Croson case is because the study that was performed for the City of Columbus, as we honor Ben Espy in a couple of days, was performed by my father's law firm before the internet, before IA, so there was coffee stains and paper cuts reviewing the data of the City of Columbus. And it took years to do that, and I want everybody to remember that we have a long history and hard fought to have this program in place in the first place. But this law is, the folks on the other side, they want to see this go away. If there's been case after case after case, just eroding this all the way down.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so I'm getting it right for the non-lawyers, I think the majority of us are.
Paid a lot for that degree and a lot of student loans, buddy.
I'm working on it. I'm going to try to enroll. But what we're talking about out of the Sixth Circuit, it basically said that it's not that you can't do race and gender specific things. You have to first do this thing, right? And if this thing doesn't work, then you can do that thing, which is the race and gender piece of it. And so I think, Director, correct me if I'm wrong, with this availability study and the expansion of these new certifications allows us to do just that. Again, not assuming that we know what the outcomes will be, but we know that we have to do this thing first, right? Because that is now new precedent that has been set out of the circuit court that we are in. Did I hit that right? I'm looking at both my lawyer and then I'm also looking at the other non-lawyer
Yes.
in the room.
I understood everything you said, so I'm
Okay.
here with you. Yes, that is correct. From the guidance that we have received from the city attorney's office is that these things have to happen first, and we have to show proof of, proof or disproof that non-gender focused programs work or do not work. And we have to have some data and some time with that. But simultaneously, we will be doing the availability study, and simultaneously to gathering that data of whether it is working or not, we would like to implement a disparity study as well.
Thank you. And then just another point to Ms. Frost's comments around participation. Even with current certification, there are still barriers to participation. Can you talk about that specific thing? Does, I think some of the things that the administration is proposing around grievances for subcontractors, does that get at some of that? I mean, this is a true thing. I think we were in this chamber not too long ago when I had a women-owned business that was certified, a minority-owned business certified, who basically testified to us that she's never gotten a contract because of those certifications. She's gotten contracts, but it's not led to because of that. Can you talk about that, I guess, participation gap that we are seeing and how the administration addresses that and how we get over the hurdle of ensuring that we are refreshing this data in a more timely way?
Yes, so last year we set forth the sunset provision, which allows us to track that data. So I believe it's every 5 years. Is that correct, Laura? So we will set the sunset provision on the data every 5 years. So we will start that process. So now we're tracking it to make sure that we stay on time, stay ahead of it, and we are refreshing the data. I do agree with what Avery has shared in regards to, and let me just point out the data. In 2018, the city of Columbus was around 8% or so when it comes to minority women-owned spend. Last year, we were at 20%. And I firmly believe that was because of the programs that we had in place. And so now we need to make sure we are identifying and working with these particular data sets to make sure that we're providing the right information, the correct information. You asked the question, do these programs solely get at the issue? They do not. We need intentionality, as you had mentioned. We need to dive deeper into these departments and look at our procurement process. We need to dive deeper into what our opportunities are available for all of our small businesses, but particularly those who have been closest away from these projects and these opportunities. It's not lack of skill set, right? It's because institutions, not just the city of Columbus, have been built to exclude certain individuals. And so what we need to do is be more intentional about that work as well as adding these additional programs.
Thank you. Ms. Frost, did we get your questions answered? Okay. Okay. We'll make sure after this hearing that we get with you so that you can get those particular answers. Thank you again. And last for our in-person speakers, we have Ms. Gail Saunders.
Chair Bankston, President Hardin, members of Columbus City Council, Deputy City Attorney, Director Jenkins, and to each of you here this evening, good evening. First, I do want to acknowledge and thank each of you for really focusing on and your diligence in searching for balance in navigating the federal mandates while continuing to uphold our city's values. Now, let me be clear, I do recognize the complexities of and the pressures of this moment, and I deeply appreciate your efforts to stay centered on what truly matters, and that is opportunity for all. I am Gail Saunders, and I am the founder and CEO of the Saunders PR Group, and we are a very proud minority and women-owned business right here in the city of Columbus. I stand before you not just a founder and a business owner, but as someone who has seen firsthand the impact that the Office of Diversity and Inclusion has had on creating real opportunity in our city. So this office has been a lifeline helping small businesses, including mine, navigate city contracts, understand processes, strengthen our businesses, gain visibility, and build capacity to contribute to Columbus's economic growth. These programs are not only door openers, but let me be clear, they are not handouts. They have helped level a playing field that too often tilts away from minority and women-owned businesses. We know that's real. You've heard it from our previous speaker. While I don't have direct numbers for Columbus, I would like to remind us that small businesses, including minority and women-owned businesses, they are very, very powerful and bring so much to our nation. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, small businesses generate about 43.5% of the U.S. gross domestic product, and we employ nearly 46% of American workers. Now that's over and about nearly half of the private sector jobs in this country. We're also an engine for job creation, accounting for over 55% of the net new job growth in the past decade, and that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, that is clear proof that small businesses drive innovation, resilience, and economic vitality. So as for the small business role in that ecosystem, like so many other businesses in this city, I am very proud to say that over the past 10 years, the Saunders PR Group has contributed millions of dollars in economic opportunity back to Black and brown and female-owned businesses and families. That's through an intentional focus on engaging and subcontracting with other Black and brown businesses and female-owned companies, and by placing strong emphasis on maintaining diverse workforce within our own firm. So I want to be clear, what's at stake here isn't just about policy or code changes. It really is about economic empowerment. So I would ask that City Council really focuses on supporting the Office of Director Jenkins and the work here, because if we don't, we really do risk unraveling years of progress. My ask tonight is that City Council ensures that the Office of Diversity and Inclusion remains empowered, not just in policy or code, but through tangible resources, reach, and resolve. Small businesses, and I speak for those of us who own Black and brown businesses, as I said before, we're not looking for handouts, and we never have. Let's be clear about that. We're simply asking for fairness. And so as I close, I do want to thank you, Chair Bankston, President Hardin, members of City Council, City Attorney's Office, and Director Jenkins for your diligence, your leadership, and your continued commitment to ensuring that opportunity is more than a word, but that it's real, and that we stand strong right here in Columbus, Ohio, because, as you said earlier, Chair Bankston, this is our moment. So as you consider this proposal, I want to please ask you to be very diligent in ensuring that we can continue to make sure that Black and brown businesses, women businesses, are able to engage in the economic vitality of this city. Continued blessings to you, and I continue to bring you joy in all that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Saunders. Any questions for Ms. Saunders? Thank you. Thank you again for your testimony, and also just would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for your intentional work that you have done in this space, as well as being a partner in many major initiatives for this city. So thank you for not only you being a business owner that is helping to build capacity for other business owners, but also thank you for what you're doing to better the city of Columbus and this community. Thank you. Director Jenkins, I think that there's one question, it's maybe not related to this specifically. I think that Ms. Saunders, her comments brought up for me, which is many of the businesses that are already certified and that we have been doing this work with, it's not simply about, again, a handout or even providing opportunity. I think a lot of the work that we have been doing, I also see our Department of Development here, is about also building capacity. Can you talk about how do we build capacity? And I think, and I'm saying this because my philosophy around this work that we do for small businesses, not simply about getting a contract with the city, getting a contract with a large entity, but building an ecosystem where small businesses are building capacity and able to do business with each other, able to do businesses with other corporations. Talk about that capacity building work that can be accomplished, and how do we do that in an authentic and intentional way?
So I think in an authentic and intentional way is from starting the certification process, as Councilmember Beatty had mentioned. And again, with this team that I have here, we're going to walk you through the whole process. So starting with that certification process, you need to have certain paperwork and documentation, right? But that's just the certification. If you go bid on a project, you need to have certain paperwork and documentation, and probably similar certain paperwork and documentation. So again, that's starting to build that capacity and making sure you have all the things that you need. When there's opportunities with the partners that we work with, my team makes sure that these businesses get access to those opportunities. I have mentioned earlier that we work with the Office of Development with businesses that aren't ready. They have programs and resources that we don't have. We work with the Freedom Fund to make sure that they get access to resources. Financial resources. We have a host of partners that we work with to make sure that these businesses are ready to take on city contracts. We want to make sure, and then the caveat that I also want to point out is when we grow this sector, when we grow small businesses, it is always with our residents in mind, right? A lot of our contracts recently we have seen the bids are astronomical. You can ask any of our directors, they're getting one bid, maybe two bids, because there's only one or two individuals within that sector. The work is plentiful right now, so they don't have to bid on certain projects. We need to build that competition in the market to keep our costs low, to make sure that our residents are receiving the best value of work, the best work possible. And then we're also making sure that we're being good stewards of their taxpayer dollars. So that capacity building starts from the certification process, and we work our way through the whole thing. And so again, that's with all of our partners, but that's also with this team here and making sure that they get access to those things.
Thank you for that. Before we close, I'll ask my colleagues if there's any comments that they may have. I just want to acknowledge that we had some folks that were engaging with us online on, I think, another equally important topic around housing. So just, I'm sorry, Ms. Goody Two Shoes, we will make sure we take your comments and get those to our chair of housing, which happens to be our council president. And then also, just Mama, I think there were some comments that you had around certification. So we will engage with you offline on that. So just wanted to make sure that we lifted that up. Any questions or, any closing comments from our colleagues?
In addition to the attorney background, I also have owned minority businesses for the last 25 years, including the oldest African-American owned business in the United States. A company that when my partner and I bought it at it had $200,000 of sales, and through these programs, we grew that company close to $10 million in sales. And I will tell you, if you speak to most women-owned businesses, most minority-owned businesses that have been extremely successful, I don't want to call any names right now, but many times government opportunities were the basis for their growth opportunity. not just getting the contracts with the government and gaining the skill, gaining the capacity to be able to do more, but also many times the programs facilitated partnering opportunities where the larger, more experienced businesses work with the smaller businesses, teaching them, helping them grow, partnering, learning one another, and that has been a source of growth for many minority and women-owned businesses. So these programs are important. These efforts are important for that as well.
Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you. I think you said you didn't want to speak for your colleagues. You're certainly speaking for this colleague. I think, Councilmember Beatty, my dad had the first Latino food store in the city. I think when I think about the immigrant community, we are many times we are minorities, we are women, we are LGBTQ+, we are one of the most entrepreneurial communities because that's how you remove barriers is you start a thing because you know how to do it when you have other barriers, and that happens to so many communities. When you don't give them a seat at the table, they bring a chair and a whole building and a whole business and whole 3 or 4 side hustles. And so I think that you're correct when you say this is our moment of how are we both good stewards of not just our resources, but all of the work that we have put in to get to this moment. I mean, Council President, this past weekend, we were together at a couple different events where you talked about how we are going back, decades back, when you think about access and when you think about civil rights and when you think about all the things that we have worked so hard to achieve. And so anytime, it's so much harder when you take something away to put it back. And when I think about, Councilmember Green often talks about our people infrastructure, that we make investments in infrastructure, the physical infrastructure that you see, and this is part of our people infrastructure, and that we need to continue to make those investments. And so I think as we ponder this, I want to thank our good friends and partners, right, who are most proximate, who work every day to ensure that our business owners have a voice and to elevate the issues and to educate all of us on the things that they are seeing and what they're feeling every day. And you push us to be better. And I think that as we consider the proposals that are before us, it is a tricky time, but it is a time where we have to be so intentional about how we move and how we continue to have progress. How we continue to have progress so that we are not part of dialing back all of the progress that the folks whose shoulders we stand on, people like your father and people like other people in this or other leaders in this community that have brought us this far, that sat in the same seats that we're sitting in. So I think I want to thank you, Chair, for holding this conversation. This is one of many. This doesn't stop here. And it doesn't just happen here in this room. It happens when people reach out to our offices. It happens when we reach out to the community. It happens every time we spend $1 in a store, right? Hopefully more than $1, but you get what I'm saying. But I want to ensure that folks know that this is a continued conversation with every member that sits up here, and this is something that is top of mind for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Any of my other colleagues? Yes, Council President.
No, thank you, Chair, for your diligence. Thank you to the Department of Office of Diversity and Inclusion, to City Attorney Klein's office for being here. It's not lost on me that looking out at the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, of what the makeup is. And we're in a moment where it's forcing, part of this is supposed to create trauma. That is part of it. The fact that we are having this conversation in this chamber led by a Black man, with the department led by a Black man, with staff that is all people of color, having this debate in this room is intentional. It strikes at my heart. that we even are in this place, and I want it to make all of us uncomfortable. I want it to make the city attorney's office uncomfortable. I want it to make the mayor's office uncomfortable, but more so, I want to make the residents of Columbus uncomfortable that we are forced to have these conversations. You should feel uncomfortable, and we shouldn't sugarcoat what we are being asked or forced to consider. But that being said, tonight was about listening. We have heard from the city attorney's office, we have heard from the mayor's office, we've heard from residents. And it's now time for council to deliberate, to think, and I will just say for myself, what I will vote to support will be the most tailored, focused, piece of or change that allows us to stay in compliance. Nothing more. Nothing more. And so I look forward to further conversations with the community, further conversations with the city attorney, and further conversations with the mayor's office and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to find out what that finely tailored piece of legislation and change is. And so I thank you for being here. I acknowledge this historic moment, and I hope that we are all very uncomfortable.
Thank you for that, Council President. I think that really embodies the tone of today's hearing and the work that will go forward. As I mentioned earlier in the hearing on July 28th, Council, or I referred, I should say, this ordinance 2116-2025, which contains the proposals that have been proposed to us by the administration as discussed today. I refer that back to committee. And just for folks who don't know Robert's Rules of Orders and all the things of what we say up here, that means that there is no set council meeting or date to take a vote on this proposal. And that is because that is exactly what it is. I think that actions have been taken to ensure that we are in compliance with current federal law as is. And those changes that have been proposed to us, we take very, very seriously and we'll review those. And my colleagues and I will continue to discuss and review this proposal and will select a return date if or when it is appropriate. There is ongoing litigation right now that we will continue to watch, and if necessary, any amendments that will need to be made to that proposal. And I very seldomly get extremely political in this seat because I feel like I represent all of Columbus. But I'm going to be very, very clear that our cities, that our democracy is under attack. Think about this, and this is age data. There are some numbers that go upwards of 90%, but conservatively, we know that 75% of the GDP produced in the United States of America comes from cities, black and brown places. 75%. There are recent studies that show that as high as 90%. So I want to make it very clear, that's blue cities, that's progressive cities, that's all of these places that folks want to point fingers at. But we are subsidizing an administration that wants to attack us. Here in Columbus, Franklin County accounts for $1 in every $7 to the state of Ohio. Central Ohio makes up $1 in every $5. You add in Cincinnati, Cleveland, these liberal places, we are driving the economy. Without us, there is no economy. So you have Trump and his administration and Republicans on the other aisle, because I'm going to be very, very pointed in my remarks, that are attacking us, but want to siphon our resources, hijack our culture, and use it for their own. But what I will tell you is this. Now, this is Nick Bankston speaking, and I'll be clear, I'll get in trouble later about it. I won't be bullied. And I've said it before on this dais, I sit here unapologetically Black, unapologetically a son of Columbus, and my job is to do what is best for the people of Columbus, for the 2 Black boys that I'm raising, Xavier and Isaiah, to ensure that they have a city that they can be proud of. And so as the council president said, I want to echo that. This proposal, we will look at it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we are compliant, but also to, again, make sure that we do not compromise our values. Because be very, very clear, without us, there is no economy. Without these progressive policies that are detrimental, there is no economy. We are the job creators. We are the income generators of every state across this entire country. And we won't apologize for that. And so I want to thank, truly thank, everyone who is doing their part. Our city attorney has a role. Their role is to keep us legal. Their role is to make sure that we are compliant with law. Our executive branch's job is to execute. But it is this body's responsibility to legislate, to have oversight, and to appropriate. And we will continue to do that. So again, I want to thank what has been brought to us in this proposal, but we will work with the administration, we will work in community to make sure that we have something that works for Columbus. And that is where we are today. And so with that, again, I want to thank my colleagues for leaning into this work. I want to thank them for the work that will come because we have much work to do around this effort. And I want to thank the people of Columbus for engaging and leaning in. We need your voice to be heard. Not just heard on this dais, but heard down the street at the State House, pick up the phone and call your representatives in Washington, D.C., and let them know that this is not acceptable. But we will continue to do what we can to fight against this current administration and this slow denigration of democracy into fascism in the United States. And I stand committed to do that. And so with that, with a smile on my face, I say this hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.